Ukrainian nationalism, its racism, and really the formula for how racism is popularized in a society. This is the subject that I would like to talk to you guys about in this video. And the main source for the information that I want to convey to you guys comes mainly from this book, Neo-Nazis and Euromaidan, which is a book that I am currently reading, by Stanislav Bishuk and Alexei Kochetkov. Very informative book, and it talks about the apparatus of Ukrainian nationalism. It gets into a little bit on where funding is coming from to support the Ukrainian nationalist movement, and it gets a lot into the history of Ukrainian nationalism. And I just got done reading a section on the anti-Russian sentiment that is very intense within Ukrainian nationalism. And if you want to talk about hatred, I mean serious hatred, serious racial animosity, look no further than Ukrainian nationalism. The hatred for the Russians is unreal, and it knows no bounds. It knows no limits. The hatred is extremely intense and extremely demonic. And so there are a number of examples of anti-Russian racism that the book gives, and I took notes on some of them. So for example, on July 2011, the Lviv Oblast Council thanked a Russian philanthropist by the name of Igor Visyakov for donating an icon of the Virgin Mary called Protection of Our Most Holy Lady. So this Russian philanthropist, Igor Vozyakov, he donated an icon of the Virgin Mary, and this icon was called the Protection of Our Most Holy Lady. This icon is very rare, and I read that it is very old, going back to the 16th century. So the Lviv Oblast Council in Ukraine thanked this Russian philanthropist for donating this icon. And the Ukrainian nationalists, they threw a fit. They got pissed off about this because the icon was from a Russian, a Muskoy, someone who is from Russia. And the leader of the Ukrainian Nationalist Party, really the Nazi Party, Mr. Tikhanibok, he said this. He said, "You can kiss only Muskal's asses." So because this city council in Ukraine accepted a donated icon of the Virgin Mary from a Russian, then this council was a disgrace. These people were race traitors. They were traitors of the Ukrainian nation. You can see the racism. You can see how violent nationalism can become. In 2008, Irina Farion, who was a leading member of the Nazi Party in Ukraine, Svoboda, she said, quote, "I think that the structure that calls itself a Moscow Patriarchate has nothing to do with Christianity. It is one of the greatest threats for independent and self-sustained development of Ukraine as long as this institution occupies the Kiev Pershok Lavra," which is the spiritual center for Ukraine. It's the location where an ancient monastery exists, and it's considered to be one of the centers for Eastern Orthodox spirituality. It's called the Kiev Pershok Lavra. And so she says, as long as this institution occupies the Kiev Pershok Lavra, a Ukrainian will be enslaved. And so she is upset that the Orthodox Church in Ukraine is under the Moscow Patriarchate. It's under the authority of Moscow. And so what these people want is a independent Ukrainian church. Independent Ukrainian church, not church under Russian, not church under Moscow, but independent Ukrainian church, a church for only Ukrainian people. This is the antithesis of Christianity. Christ established the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is the universal church. That is the literal meaning of the title, the Catholic Church. The word Catholic means universal. I'm sure a lot of you already know this. And so these people, these nationalists, they go contrary to the spirit of Catholicism, the universal spirit of Catholicism. And they say, well, we want our own ethnic church. And so in the sphere of the Eastern Orthodox Church, many a time, churches become nothing more than ethnic clubs. And you will see this also on the Roman Catholic side, not with the Roman Latin churches, like the traditional Latin churches, nor with the common Catholic parish, but you will see this with the Eastern churches that are under Rome. So you will see this with the Maronite churches where everyone or almost everyone is Lebanese. And if you aren't Lebanese, even if you are Middle Eastern, if you are not Lebanese specifically, you are ostracized. No one really talks to you. You're kind of looked down upon. I've seen this myself. I attended a Maronite church for a number of months. And even though I looked pretty much like everyone else, I mean, I'm Middle Eastern myself. Middle Eastern people do have a common look, just like Europeans have a common look. You could sense the, I don't want to say hatred, that's too much of a strong word, but you could just sense that they didn't want you to be there. Pretty much that. You see this also with the Croatian churches. A lot of nationalism, a lot of hatred for Serbs. I have actually seen this myself in one experience. Early last year, I'm pretty sure it was early last year, 2017, I actually met a Croatian-American Catholic priest. He was not born in Croatia. He was born in the U.S. He was originally from Chicago, but nonetheless, he had a very strong connection with his Croatian heritage. And I remember speaking to him about the Balkan crisis of the 1990s, and he said, well, I don't agree with NATO bombing the Balkans, but I must admit that I thoroughly enjoyed watching Serbs die in that conflict. This is what this priest told me. He said, I thoroughly, and he used this word, thoroughly, and he also used the word enjoyed. I thoroughly enjoyed watching Serbs die. This is an American Croatian. And I was shocked. Now, I wouldn't be as shocked if I heard this from some regular guy, who's a part of the laity. Just some Croatian guy going to church, he doesn't like Serbs. It would still be shocking. It would still be disturbing. But it wouldn't be as shocking as opposed to hearing it from a priest. It was much more shocking to hear it from a priest than from a layperson. And you would think, here's a priest, he's supposed to be a shepherd of the people, he's supposed to eschew racism and things like that. But here he is enthusiastically embracing a very violent nationalistic sentiment against another people. So it's there. And this is really the biggest threat to the unity of Christendom, or there's no more Christendom, so I shouldn't use that word. It's the greatest threat to the universal spirit of Catholicism, and that is nationalism. No, we want our church. No, Croatian church. No, Serbian church. No, Albanian church. No, Ukrainian church. No, Russian church. No, Polish church. No, we want independent Slovakian church. No, Latvian church. No, we want independent church of Baltic states. No, we want independent church of regions near adjacent to the Caspian Sea. No, we want church. Russian church for Slavic community living in Latin America. I mean, like, how far do you want to take this? We want church for Ukrainian community living in Peru. Many Ukrainian people living in Peru, we need church for them. We should have our own patriarchate in Lima, Peru. The church for ethnic Ukrainians living in Peru. No, I suggest we have the church for ethnic Slavic people living in the nation of Mexico. Many Slavic people still live in Mexico. We need our own church. I mean, how far do you want to take this? How far do you want to take this? Like, you just start fragmenting the body of Christ, and you perpetuate this fragmentation to the point where anyone can start a movement advocating for further fragmenting the church for some other, or for some, I don't know, ethnic aspiration of some sort. It's craziness. It really is crazy. But once you start going down the road of ethnic nationalism and ethno-nationalism, where's the limit? Where is the limit? People say, oh, we have our limits, right? We believe in being proud of our culture and all that stuff. That's how they always begin. They always begin by saying, we are proud of our culture. What's wrong with that? Is it a crime to hate our culture? Is it a crime to want to preserve our race? What's your problem? What's your freaking problem? Do you hate us? You're the racist. You hate white people. I mean, people get into this mentality, and this is how this begins. It begins that way. It never begins with, let's kill all the others, okay? It never begins that way. It never begins with, let's kill everyone who doesn't look like us. It never begins with that way. It never begins with, let's kill the retards, let's kill the cripples. It doesn't begin that way. And this is what makes the discussion on this issue so annoying and exasperating. Because when I bring up the dangers of nationalism, what the other side does, and what the tools who are being manipulated by the other side does, or do, is they will present the marketing gimmicks as arguments. I say that the rise of ultranationalism, ethno-nationalism, identitarianism, alt-right ideology, whatever you want to call it, is an indication of something much more sinister rising up. And that what we are witnessing now is simply a face that is willing and waiting to change and fully reveal the totality of its evil disposition when the right time comes, when the green light is lit. And people say, oh no, these are people, they're just proud of their culture. They're just proud of their culture. And it's like, you do realize that what you are saying is the marketing gimmick that they present in order to gain the trust of others. To win an argument. Oh, we're not racist, we're just A, B, C, and D. Oh, we're not for genocide or eugenics, we're just for scientific observation. I heard this I hear this all the time from these alt-right people. I heard this recently from some guy who called himself Vox Day. He says, "Oh, I'm not a racist. I'm just observing reality," or something like that. It's like, I don't hate black people. I'm just observing that they're stupid. Or I'm not saying that white people are superior. I'm just saying that white people are genetically more intelligent. It's like, it's just a sophism to hide their own agenda, and the agenda is eugenics. Right when you start saying, well, these people are genetically superior for some sort of context, then you've just opened the gateway of eugenics. And there is no limit to eugenics. You'll start out by saying, well, eugenics just means good genes, or it means good stock, and we just want to have a healthier, fitter society. Yeah, when have we heard that bullshit before? The Third frickin' Reich. We want a fitter society. So how are we going to do that? They start out by saying, well, we're going to design babies in laboratories. We're going to design babies on petri dishes. We're going to make a fitter human being through CRISPR. Well, guess what happens? It doesn't work. You don't get this chimerical superhuman out of that because it's something from a sick man's fantasy. It's a bunch of sick bastards who live in Silicon Valley, and they live somewhere in Germany, somewhere in Israel, somewhere in New York, somewhere in I don't know, Bethesda, Maryland, somewhere. And these people have a sick fantasy of genetically engineering a fitter, healthier society. And guess what happens when that fantasy will not be met? Guess what's going to happen when that fantasy doesn't get materialized? They're going to start intensifying their methods. Oh, well, we couldn't make the superhuman in a laboratory. So maybe what we should do is, and let's repeat history again. Let's kill off the people with the bad genes so that the good people with the good genes can be preserved and kept alive, and so that they could breed and perpetuate their good genes so that we can evolve down the road towards the Übermensch, the Superman, the man who is above human. That's where this shit leads to. So don't give me this bullshit about, I'm just observing reality. I just want to see a fitter society. How are you creating that fitter society? Oh, through genetically modifying humans? Oh, through abortion? Like John Entine? Let's talk a little bit about this. I know this video is long enough already, but I want to talk about this. Because I want to teach you guys something. I'm here to educate people. I don't consider myself a professor or a teacher or whatever, but I do like to convey to people knowledge that they don't think about, or to convey to people ideas that they don't think about. Recently, I did an article on the John Templeton Foundation. It is a Protestant, and yes, a Protestant organization. It is not Protestant in the nominal sense. It is indeed an explicitly Protestant organization that makes it quite clear that a huge part of their agenda is to inundate the world with Protestant theology. And they fund causes specifically to spread not only Protestantism, but the heresy of theistic evolution, in which they merge Protestant theology with Darwinism. And this is nothing new. This has been going on really since the beginning of Darwinism, going back to the 19th century. And you can look at Ernest Haeckel, who was a German Darwinist who began to spread Darwinism into Germany. And Haeckel actually believed that Darwinism was a continuation of the Protestant rebellion against the church. And he was actually right. The Protestant Reformation said, to hell with the sacraments and to hell with the papacy, we're going to do our own thing. And again, Protestantism, like these crazy nationalists in the Ukraine, sprung from nationalism. Because it was all about detaching from the universal church and making a national church. We don't want a church that is under the universal Catholic Church. We want a German church. We want the Church of England. We want the Church of Sweden. We want, the Church of Iceland or whatever. It was based on nationalism, and it emanated from a rebellious nationalistic spirit. And so the Templeton Foundation is simply continuing the legacy of Protestantism in promoting Darwinism. And just as the Protestants said, we're going to deny the sacraments, we are going to sever ourselves from the universal church. Darwinism extends that rebellion and says, well, we're just going to deny creation. And we are going to make up this scam called evolutionism. And here's another thing that I want to add. The scam of evolutionism, because that's what it is. It's a giant freaking scam. And I just want to add something real quick on that. Years ago, I saw a documentary, I believe it was made by Nat Geo, and it was called something like The Journey of Man or The Journey of Us or something like that. And it started out, with microbes coming out of a swamp somewhere in Africa, I don't know, and humans popped up out of this somehow randomly, this complex creature, human being with the brain, which we don't even fully understand, and the eyes and the nervous system, this whole complex biological apparatus just popped up randomly. Well, of course, it started out as like a fish creature, and then that evolved into a reptile or something, and then the reptile evolved into a damn Wolverine, and the Wolverine, I don't know, it evolved into a damn monkey creature. I don't know the full system of this bullshit scam. But that's what they were basically saying. Like, we humans evolved from other animals. And then all of a sudden, from a monkey creature, you have the damn orangutan, with the stick, and, he's hitting a fish or something. He's trying to break a walnut or whatever. And then from it became like, ooh, 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 ooh. And then the monkey kind of evolved into a Neanderthal. And then something happened where some of the Neanderthals evolved into humans, right? And these humans were, they got these actors to play the Neanderthal, and then they got the actors to play the humans, and the humans are still primitive. They're like cavemen, but they're still humans nonetheless. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they have this scene where like a Neanderthal, I'm not even joking, is banging some female human. And all of a sudden the narrator is like, and then Neanderthals and humans mated together or something like that. I turned it off. I'm like, I'm not watching this bullshit. This is some sick fantasy from some science fiction writer. This is like something that you would read out of Dianetics. This is like something that you would read off from the Church of Scientology. But what's so scammy and hypocritical about this is that these scientists, really they're a bunch of narcissists with a God complex, but these scientists act as though that they know what happened. They know exactly what happened. I'm thinking, we don't even know everything about World War I. We're still learning things about World War I, and that was around 100 years ago. We're still learning new things about World War II, and that was like 75 years ago. There are books, a plethora of books, many, many, many books, written on World War I and World War II every single year. We are still writing books on the life of Hitler. We're still debating on whether or not he really killed himself or whether or not he went to Argentina where he died in the 1960s. And here we are acting as though we know what happened 6 billion years ago, 6 gazillion years ago. Oh, we know that some Neanderthal creature was pounding some woman and they created a freaking master race or something like that. We know what happened 1 billion freaking years ago. That's what they say, 1 billion years ago. I don't believe in that, but that's what they say. You bastards know what happened 6 billion years ago? You know that some Neanderthal got lucky with some woman somewhere in Africa? But we don't even know the totality of both world wars. We're still learning things about the Civil War. We're still learning things about the freaking Salem witch trials. We can't even fully explain 9/11. Oh, a plane hit the Pentagon. Then you watch the video and it's like, where's the freaking plane? But that's really what happened, and there's still debate going on about that. We don't fully know World War One, and yet we're going to sit here and say, oh yeah, we know what happened a billion years ago. What a load of bullshit. What a load, as the English say, of bullocks. But yet they are promoting these ideas because they want to promote racialism. They want to promote the old racism of the first half of the 20th century. You look at the Max Planck Institute. You look at one of its leaders. The Max Planck Institute is one of the, if not the biggest, most prestigious scientific institution in Germany. You look at one of their leaders. His name is Svante Pabo. Guy is a complete psycho. He's a sodomite who, believe it or not, dissects aborted human embryos for a living. That's what he does. He dissects them, and then he writes research papers on them. I'm not joking. I actually wrote about this. You can look this up. Svante Pabo and a bunch of other scientists from the German Max Planck Institute do experiments on aborted embryos. And Svante Pabo actually dissected a bunch of human embryos that were aborted. I'm not joking. This is pretty damn barbaric stuff, but this is what these people do. This is what these psychos do. They're psychos in their ideas, and they're psychos in their actions. We came from a man or a Neanderthal male banging some human female, 6 gorillion years ago. I don't know. They're psychopaths in their ideas. They're psychopaths in their actions. And the point of the research, which is really human experimentation, the point of this human experimentation was to find out more on our Neanderthal genetics. You see how these crazy-ass ideas, once the people who promote them are given positions of power and prestige, do you see what these ideas lead to? Genocide, death, murder, human experimentation. You're seeing a microcosm of what is to come in the research laboratory, in cooperation and in conjunction with the abortion clinic. You are seeing the microcosm of the genocide that is to come. Well, we're going to research our Neanderthal genetics. Well, how are we going to do that? Let's do human experimentation and murder babies and then dissect them. Well, what's going to happen when these psychopaths get their own death camps? We're going to research our Neanderthal roots. How are we going to do that? Let's dissect people with brown eyes. I mean, something crazy like that, you can imagine. Because they say that humans and Neanderthals mated 5 billion years ago or whatever, 500 million years ago. I'm going to have some asshole writing me. It's not 500 million. It was really 100 million years ago. It was 60 million years ago. Like, you got a freaking mark on the timeline of human history on this. Like, oh, I got a mark here. It was 6 million years ago. We know this for a fact. Yeah, we got a writing from some ancient Greek guy who lived then. It's like the insanity of these people. But they say that the humans and Neanderthals mated, and the spawn that came out of that, produced the European race and the Asian race. But it didn't produce the black race. They say that black people are the only ones who don't have this Neanderthal race, Neanderthal genetics. And they say that the genetics gives one a better capacity for adaptation and conditioning oneself to certain environments and conditioning oneself to the European climate. This is what they teach at the Max Planck Institute. So we are superior because we are related to this ancient Neanderthal creature that we don't even know existed, but they say that it did. And we have these special genetics. It's kind of like what the Nazis used to say. They used to say that the Northern European race was related to an ancient race of people called the Hyperboreans, and that the Northern Europeans were related to the Hyperboreans, but today it's not the Hyperboreans, it's Neanderthal. Anyway, going back to Ukrainian nationalism. In July 13th, 2010, Svoboda, which is the Nazi party in Ukraine, organized a demonstration against a visit by Vladimir Gunyayev, who was actually Patriarch Kirill, really the Pope of Russia. And they did this demonstration in front of the Ukrainian Presidential Administration building, and they declared in this demonstration, "Down with Moscow colonizer priest!" and "Ukrainian Orthodox Church against Moscow heresy." Again, what is this rooted in? It's rooted in racialist nationalism. To hell with the Russians, not because we disagree with them theologically, but because they're Russian. To hell with the Russian church because it's ran by Russians. We want a church ran by Ukrainians. We don't want a universal church. We don't want a church that accepts the human family. We want a church that accepts only one member of human family, only Ukrainian. To hell with everyone else. In May of 2012, 30 Svoboda nationalists attacked the Temple of All Sacred Warriors. I should say the Church of All Sacred Warriors. When we say temple in the English language, it could mean Buddhist, pagan, but that's how the book says it, so it's no big deal. So 30 Svoboda nationalists, 30 Nazis attacked the Temple of All Sacred Warriors. The nationalists attacked Christian symbols. Now, people say, "Oh no, what's wrong with Ukrainian people trying to just defend their traditions?" Well, you tell me if this is defending tradition. The nationalists attacked Christian symbols and objects. They vandalized the crucifix, the altar, and Christian icons. How is this defending tradition again? Well, it's defending Ukrainian tradition. Christianity is a foreign entity that came from Jewish people. Oh, okay, so you want to go back to pagan tradition. Oh, I see now the agenda. It's not really about preserving culture, right, in the conventional sense of the word. You know, like we want to preserve Christmas. It's not about that at all. It's not about, just being good patriots, as we say here in the U.S. It's really about paganism and reviving paganism. That's what this is about. Truly, ultimately, it's about a pagan revival. And what comes with pagan revival? Human sacrifice, genocide, horrors, savagery, barbarity, the insidious ways of antiquity. That's what these people want to revive. And that's why you will see these Ukrainian nationalists walking around with torches. They look like a bunch of pagans. Well, what's wrong with torches, Ted? Are you against fire? Are you against fire now? Are you against light? It's just a form of light. That's all it is. Torches have symbolic meaning, and when a bunch of people living in the 21st century walk around holding torches, we all know what they're trying to do. They're trying to emulate the Nazis. They're trying to make a political and ideological statement, conveying a disposition of violent nationalism. That's really what it is. In April of 2013, Svoboda activists attacked the St. Vladimir Cathedral in Novoarchangelsk. According to the Diocese of Kirovograd, there were 300 of these Nazis who broke into the church, and they were led by a leader of Svoboda. His name is Sviatoslav Khanenko. They broke the gates of the church and physically attacked the clergy who were in the courtyard of the church. They tore their garments and insulted them. Well, what does that remind me? The same thing was happening when the Nazis were rising up in Germany and in Austria. The same thing was happening when the fascists were rising up in Italy as well. There was a story in which fascists were attacking clergy. And you can read about this. There was one case in particular in Austria in which Nazis beat up a prelate. In fact, there is a July 5th, 1939 article that was published by the New York Times. And it says, Vienna, July 4th, Theodor Cardinal Innitzer, Archbishop of Vienna, was brutally assaulted in Königsbrunn on Sunday following a series of Nazi demonstrations while he was making a tour of rural districts northwest of Vienna. So here we have a story in which Nazis attacked a bishop, an archbishop. There's a book called Hitler's Austria by Evan Burr Bucky, and he also talks about this type of thing that was happening. So, for example, he says, let's see here. He says here, in Salzburg on October 17th, Nazi gangs again vandalized Archbishop Weitz's residence, hurling insults and chanting, "We want to see our bishop," in Dachau. And in Amstetten, the Hitler Youth on October 12th and November 19th smashed the windows of the municipal rectory. So Nazis were indeed attacking churches. And here we have stories, not from 1939, but from 2012, 2013. Very recently. This is within our own lifetime. This is very, very recent. This is just a few years ago. Nazis attacking prelates, attacking clergy, attacking churches. Vandalizing crosses, icons, the holy altar. This is happening now. It's happening in Ukraine, which is a European country. It's not happening in Africa. We're so used to hearing about things like this happening in Africa that we've become desensitized to it. It's not happening in Africa, where, today Muslims attack the church. Oh, we've heard that a million times. It's happening in Europe. And when something happens in Europe, watch out, because what affects Europe affects the whole world. Europe is the civilizational center of the earth. Europe civilized the world. Now, when I say Europe, I'm not saying that Europeans have this innate ability to civilize people. Because when Europeans become savage, they become more savage than a lot of other people. They become extremely savage. They become just as, saying that they become more savage than a lot of other people is not an adequate statement. When Europeans become savage, they become just as savage as anyone else who is savage. What I am saying is that because Europeans are the descendants of Japheth, and Japheth was told by Noah that you are going to take the temple of Shem, meaning you are going to occupy the temple of Shem. You are going to take on the torch of leading the church. That means that Europeans have a role to play in this world in civilizing the world and bringing Christianity to the world. And so Europe is the center of civilization for that reason. It's the reason of a covenant that was made between God and Japheth. You can read this in the book of Genesis. Noah says, Japheth, you are going to sit in the tent of Shem, meaning the temple of Shem. Well, Christianity came from where? Israel. It came from Shem. The first disciples were who? The first leaders of the church. They were Semites. These were Jewish people. Our Messiah is a Semite. So the line of the Messiah comes from Shem. But something is going to happen. This is what's implied in Noah's blessing. He says, you are going to occupy the tent of Shem. Well, what happened to Shem in the tent? Well, it's implying that Shem is going to leave the tent, in that Shem is going to deny his Messiah. And so, what does St. Paul tell the Jews in the book of Acts? I'm done with you guys. I'm going to go preach to the Gentiles. And that's why Paul was going to Rome, he was going to Malta, he was going to Macedonia, he was going all over Europe. The first followers of Christ were going all over Europe. They were witnessing to the Europeans, bringing them out of paganism and into the church. What was happening? Japheth coming into the tent of Shem, and therefore leading the world in Christianity, leading the world to Christianity. And so what happens in Europe, because Japheth has this role of influence, what happens in Europe affects the whole world. I can't fully explain it, but there's something very spiritual involved in this. In that when something significant takes place in Europe, like a war, it is a devastating tempest that takes the whole world into its sphere of chaos. Svoboda, the Nazi party in Ukraine, was backed by John McCain, who began cooperating with the Nazis in 2013. It's very interesting that the very politician who backed the Syrian revolution also backed the Nazi revolution in Ukraine, which indicates to me that the very forces behind the destabilization of the Middle East and the reinvigoration of Islamism in the Middle East are the same forces who are behind the rise of European nationalism. People want the powers that be wanted to see the destabilization of the Middle East. We know this just from looking at the CIA archives. They destabilized the Middle East by removing the leaders. You guys know this already. They removed the governments there. They did regime change policy. It led to a disaster. It also led to the rise of Islamism, which is exactly what the CIA, exactly what the powers that be wanted. That's why CIA worked with the Muslim Brotherhood. CIA has worked with Al-Qaeda. That's why Israel has given weapons to, a dozen different Islamic rebel groups in Syria. That's why the Dutch were giving weapons to the rebels. I forgot. I'm trying to remember which group it was. The Sultan Murad Brigade. The Dutch were giving weapons to those guys, and those guys were working in conjunction with Al-Qaeda. So NATO wanted to see the rise of Islamism. NATO is backing the nationalists in Ukraine. They have been backing the nationalists for years now. And it just goes to show you the two correlate. They want to see the rise of Islamism, which means the rise of the Ottoman Empire. They want to see the rise of nationalism, which is going to lead to the rise of pan-Germanism. So they want to see the rise of Turkey. They want to see the rise of Germany. So it's very interesting, but the whole thing is a damn Gladio op. That's all this is. Gladio was a project done by NATO to use terrorism as a way to spark European nationalism. And what helped to spark European nationalism? Violence done by Muslims in Europe. So instead of using, because what Gladio did was they would have these terrorist attacks happen in Europe, and then they would say, oh, it was the communists who did them. Well, instead of blaming communists, now they're just saying, well, it's these damn migrants. And they're using it to increase nationalism. That's what the counter-jihad is about. What's also interesting is that Svoboda is backed by AMREN, American Renaissance, the American Eugenics organization led by Jared Taylor. And in 2014, an American nationalist by the name of John Morgan did a lecture for AMREN in which he lobbied for Svoboda. You can watch this on YouTube. Type in John Morgan and Svoboda and you will see. Morgan was one of the founders of Arctos Media, which has been publishing new right or nationalist literature in Europe. So you're seeing it. You're seeing these entities, be they in government or be they lobbyist groups, pushing for nationalism. And nationalism, the rise of nationalism, it really has a formula. And you see this formula throughout modern history. You have foreigners living in a society. The people who have been living there the longest don't like the newcomers, or they don't like who they consider to be outsiders. Then they begin to say that the outsiders are ruining our culture, blah, blah, blah. And the world saw this in the United Kingdom in the first half of the 20th century. Look up Reverend John White. He was a Presbyterian, which means Calvinist, minister, one of the most influential ministers in Scotland in the early years of the 20th century. And he was also a huge proponent of eugenics. And Reverend John White said that the Irish will never assimilate into our society. Where have we heard this before? He said that the Irish are politically dangerous for Scottish society because most of them vote for the Labour Party. Where have we heard this? We've heard this before. Oh, these people vote for the Democrats. That's why we can't have them here. Oh, these people are going to destroy our society politically, blah, blah, blah. That's why we have to do A, B, C, and D. And these things are said not because the people saying them really care about a healthy political structure, but because they are using them as a way to justify their own racism. And Reverend White also said that the Irish are going to destroy the racial purity of the Scottish people. Yeah, well, that's a load of bullshit. And anyone living in the UK and anyone who lives around Scottish people will know that that's pretty much a load of bullshit. But this is what was said, and it's like, well, we've heard this before. These people are going to ruin our society. They're not going to assimilate. They are a danger to our political structure. It's like, we've heard this before. We've heard this 1,000 times. It's the same damn formula over and over again. And this is what makes it so dangerous. What makes it so dangerous is that it correlates with a psychological impulse that people have. I'm talking about the mob mentality. It correlates so effectively with it. You get the mob up by saying that these people are a danger to you. They're a danger to your culture. They're going to rape your women. Oh my goodness. And don't forget that the people who are pushing for these ideas are the very people pushing for Darwinism and eugenics. These are the very people who say that they know what happened 6 billion years ago. And if you actually believe people like that, then you are always going to fall down the road to perdition.